Tomer, welcome to the Easy Conversations podcast. Thank you for joining me this morning. I'm really grateful for you taking the time, and I'm excited about our conversation and sharing your story with the listeners. Before we jump into it, I do want to give you an opportunity to share with the listeners who you are, what it is that you do, and what's brought you here today.
Thanks for having me. Yeah. I'm Tomer. I started a company called Felt. Felt's an app everybody can download from the App Store, and it lets you create personal handwritten cards. You handwrite on your finger using your finger, right on your phone. You can put photos on your cards. You can pick from our designs, and then we print and mail them for you within 24 hours. And we started the business because we wanted to send a handwritten thank you card. And I've always been a person who loves the energy of gratitude, and sitting down and handwriting a card and taking the time for expressing that feeling always was something I did ever since a kid, since I was a
Hmm.
child. And when we went to go make one, I was like, there's got to be an app for this. And the apps only let you type on your card. They still printed them, but they only let you type. And I was like, I really think a handwritten card is much more in line with what I wanted than a typed card. So that's how we started the business. And now you can make anything from a birthday card to an anniversary card. And still the core of the company is around sharing gratitude and sentiment with the people you love and care about.
Hmm. Yeah, no, I think it's a really cool concept and idea. What gave you I think just walking us through, how did you get to that idea of I recognize that you saw a market perhaps here that there wasn't something like this, right? In terms of having an app. But what led you to this place, right? In
Yeah.
terms of your story and why did you and then what did it look like in terms of proceeding with putting it all together?
I think that starting a business for people like myself is a journey. And for me, it was following this intuition, this notion that I had of building something that wasn't there before. I wasn't ever interested in doing things that had been done. I always wanted to solve a problem that I felt was there, and I was always excited about that. I had this innate interest in solving, problems that I saw as a young kid. I would my dad had me nailing this piece of wood along the bottom of a wall, right where the carpet meets the wall, like crown molding type stuff. But you have to get your fingers down there, right at the bottom, and you have to hold this tiny nail with your tiny fingers, and you have to hit it with a hammer. And I was kept hitting my fingers, and I was like, "This is terrible."
Hmm.
And I always had this innate drive to solve problems. So, like for me, I solved that little problem by grabbing a wooden dowel, this wooden post from actually I took down our clothes rack in the closet, took down the wooden dowel, drove a nail into one end of it, pulled it out. So now I had this like little hole. Then I could stick a nail in there, pointy end sticking out. Then I can hold the dowel and tap it. And it would drive the nail into the crown molding. I could finish it with a hammer. I share that because for anybody who is interested in starting their own business, I think it's, I think we have to take steps backwards and start
Yeah.
with what are you interested in? What
Hmm.
excites you? And as a human being, being able to follow your excitement, I think is a really intuitive path in life.
Hmm.
And harnessing your intuition, harnessing your ability to have intuition, I believe is what partially makes us very human and very different. And so that is my journey. My journey is following that excitement, that innate intuition. And mine happens to be I like solving problems. I like making things better in that way. And this is no different. With felt, we wanted to send a thank you card. The stores were closed. We happened to live in a pretty rural area. And I was like, there's got to be an app that lets you make a card and we'll get
Yeah.
it inside a mail, system for you.
Hmm.
And it happened that there were. So like I wasn't even trying to necessarily start that business.
Yeah.
But when I found out that you couldn't handwrite, and I thought that was a major get, right? I thought that was a big problem. And there's a saying, scratch your own itch.
Hmm.
I was not going to mail a, a thank you card with a typed message. It felt back then, this is 2011.
Hmm.
So direct messaging wasn't even a thing yet, but it
Yeah.
felt like printing a text message to me. And I
Hmm.
was like, we have to be able to handwrite. And then what I want people to hear is you always start with what you can do,
Hmm.
because the best way to not do anything is to believe that you have to have things outside of your own abilities, whatever your abilities are. So
Yeah.
mine, in that sense, was okay. I want to handwrite on a screen. I want to print it. And so I went to the app store and downloaded an art app that lets you draw.
Hmm.
And I drew on my screen. I signed my name. I wrote some messages. And then I went to my friend and I was like, hey, can I use your laser printer? He had a pretty nice laser printer. I didn't have one. And I just took a screenshot, emailed it to myself, and printed it. And
Hmm.
I looked at it, I was like, this is good. I would be okay sending this. This is nice.
Yeah.
And when you have an idea for something that you're excited about and you think it's something you want to pursue, find out ways of doing it. You don't have
Yeah.
to do the whole thing, but you also shouldn't say, oh, okay, how much money am I going to need to raise? Oh, okay, this, that, and the other. Because if I were to have done that, it would have been this frivolous exercise. Right?
Yeah.
It's frivolous because nothing matters. If I can't handwrite on a screen and make it look good, who cares how much money I can raise or how much money I even need to raise? So I think that's a really concrete tip is a wise person once told me, do what you can with what you have.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do what you can with what you have. And you'll see that by following your excitement, by doing what you can with what you have, synchronicities and different things will start to happen in line with your excitement.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. I appreciate you sharing that whole kind of the entrepreneurial pursuit there, as well as your own journey and tying the two together. And what I'm hearing from you is obviously, if you are identifying a problem, try to listen to that intuition, like you said, and see how you can address it. But then, if there's something you're passionate about in terms of how to solve that problem, go work towards it and don't let some of the external factors that perhaps are not in your control immediately limit your ability to solve that problem. And what I'm hearing from you is often when you go down that path, things will start happening for you, or you're going to invite opportunities that may or may not help you, but at least will give you a sense of if you're on the right path.
Yeah.
And for a lot of people, when they're on that path, I think as humans, we are susceptible to fear, and there's that fear around uncertainty or fear around failure. And then we all end up holding ourselves back. And a lot of the times, even when you hear entrepreneurs talk, or what's out there for us to see is only the success stories, right? You don't hear about the failures or how many times they failed to finally get to the point where they are. And I think those failures serve as a lot of lessons too, right? And we take so many lessons from those opportunities that we're able to apply and tweak. So what I'm trying to get at is if you don't put yourself out there or take that risk, you're not going to learn anything.
Yeah. Before I answer that, I'm gonna turn my phone on silent
Yeah.
mode real quick. I forgot to do that. Okay, back. Yeah, and I want to expand. I want to take this. step by step. So the first thing is we live in physicalness, right? No matter how spiritual you are, we live on planet Earth and you live in a three-dimensional space. And so it's the language of action. If you don't take action, nothing will happen. And
Mhm.
I was sitting in meditation this morning and I was contemplating this feeling of deep worry
Mm.
that I've had my whole life. And I'm only now starting to even be able to use the word worry because it's a pretty shameful feeling in my experience. So now I'm starting to be able to name it as worry, like I worry. And what came up for me today was that I worry because I feel like if I worry, things will change. Yeah, as a kid, I had very little control over my physical environment. And so I started to believe that worrying about something would change it.
Right.
And that has carried through all the way my whole life. And I know that that's not true. I know that's a belief that isn't sound. And that goes directly in the face of entrepreneurial endeavors, right? You have
Yeah.
to take action in the physical space that we live in. I downloaded an app. I went to my friend's house, right? Making a list is barely the start, right? It's better than just thinking about it, but actually trying to do what you can with what you have is really like the basis of your recipe. If you're trying to make a soup, taking what you can out of your pantry and starting to concoct it step is the basics of it. So I just want to say some stuff about that. And then I want to talk a little bit about fear
Yeah.
because fear is interesting. And I've also been learning a lot more about it and experiencing some interesting paradoxes. So what I learned is that fear is the self propagating experience, right? You get afraid and then you can also be afraid of being afraid,
Mhm.
right? You can, oh man, if I feel fear around this, that really suck, right? If I go talk to that person and they say no, I'll feel bad. And then I'm starting to feel afraid about feeling bad. And it can double back on itself. Now, why
Mm.
does it do that? What I learned is that we have a this kind of pinnacle point, right? This very finite sort of point, right? And if you pour water on a point, it's going to go one of two ways. It's going to go this way or that way, depending on where you pour it. And this feels very similar to that because and if you have no if you have no separation from death, then the fear of dying always exists within us. And that fear innately drives all fears because all fears come back to I am in danger. What
Right.
is fear? Yeah. Fear literally is you're in danger of something. It's always peril, right? You're never in danger of getting a bruise,
Right.
right? Like you're never in danger of a scratch. No, it's, if I fall, I could die. If I get bruised, oh my gosh. As a kiddo, right? Kids fall, they scrape their knees. Have you ever seen a kid grab his knee and look at it as if it's the beginning of the end, right? That innate feeling of death is really important to talk about because if you want to know what holds us back in so many things, not just being an entrepreneur, talking to people, going out sometimes when you really need to socialize and you start to procrastinate and stay back at home. It's this innate feeling and fear of death.
Mhm.
And so I believe you have two options. You can address it.
Yep.
And I don't know how you address it without having a spiritual belief, I've
Yeah.
chosen to have a spiritual belief, and mine isn't rooted in religion. So I'm not, I'm not trying to have that sort of like argument,
Yeah.
but mine is rooted in just energy. I'm energy. Energy exists. When I die, I'm still energy.
Hmm.
And as I've gone down that path over the last 5 years or so, I've noticed a huge change in my entrepreneurial abilities. So if you have something in life that you want to attain that is in this realm of, oh, I need help, oh, I'm stuck, oh, I'm in fear, having something that addresses the innate fear of death and dying and being destroyed and ceasing to exist, I believe is really important. Because otherwise, fear, you can't transcend fear unless you actually root it. So you have to get to the root of what you're afraid of. And as if you're like me, it is death. At the
Right.
end of all, sorry,
It's connecting.
my speaker. At the end of all fears, it's the fear of destruction. It's the fear of not existing anymore. It's the fear of dying.
Yeah.
Why don't
Yeah.
I go talk to that person? Oh, if I talk to them and they say no, I'll be crushed. And
Mm.
if I'm crushed, I'll just go home and wither away and die. It
Mm.
all comes back to that. Maybe we should talk a little bit about that more as a society, as a culture, and normalize, I think. And I know religion has obviously done this, but I think we're in a different time where we need a different normal.
Mm.
But what I mean by that is just like, I think having more open conversations about spirituality and what's really going on in our conscious experience
Mhm.
will help us transcend fear.
Yeah. I agree with you. Absolutely. I think there is that, again, touching on what I said, fear can almost, like, we may become stagnant because of fear, right? It's debilitating. And I could see how you could draw the parallel to ultimately leading to fear of death. And one of the things I see as a therapist when I'm working with people, that fear of the future, whatever it may be, is debilitating because that's what creates anxiety. And people are really able to move past that anxiety and move forward is when they're able to face that fear head on. And often you realize that you've created this whole story in your head, which is far worse than what's reality when it comes to fear. And I agree with you. I think as a society, we tend to struggle to contemplate death because there's so much discomfort around that. And as a species, we've become, if you look at ancient civilizations, there was no sense of comfort there. They were always surrounded by threats. They were always on the move. They were always exploring. So they never had the opportunity to become comfortable in their environment. And now we're in a different time where we become so comfortable, and that again debilitates us and we're not growing in that sense. And I think that contemplation of death is important to your point, whether what kind of whatever your spiritual practice is. I agree with you when you look at it from a spiritual perspective, it's helpful. And I've had to contemplate death. And when you get to the point where if you fully appreciate the fact that, like you said, the energy doesn't go away, if you truly believe that, your worldly existence, yes, that may change after you die and perhaps transcend into something else, that alone then I think helps with overcoming that fear. And you start living life in a different way. You don't have that scarcity mindset. You approach life with more abundance because you're not worried about, oh, if my time in this world ends, that's it. And I think a lot of people are on that hamster wheel because they feel like they have such a short time here or time's going to run out. Or now you start seeing people trying to find ways of extending their life or finding that sense of immortality and just it's all a distraction at the end of the day rather than focusing on what's in front of you. And I think
Yeah.
that parallel that you draw with being an entrepreneur too, I see that, right? What's focus on what's in front of you. Don't worry about whether you're going to get funding or whether someone's going to invest in your idea. Just try to solve the problem in front of you. And that's what life is, right? Focus on today. Don't worry too much about tomorrow. You could, yeah, today might be your last day on this earth, right?
And let's talk. I thought that was really cool analogy you drew, or maybe even let's make an analogy out of ancient times, right? So in ancient times, you had to move, like you said, you had all the dangers abound, right? You literally had animals that wanted to eat you and that could eat you. And yet you had families, you had little kids playing. And in some senses, yeah, you had a lot of joy and happiness. And we know this from really the pursuit of arts and music
Yep.
and the different things that we know happened and have carried along.
And even like some of the technologies they built, right? Like you think about the ancient pyramids and all of that. It
Yeah.
just blows my mind.
It blows my mind. And my point here is that what I want to do is two analogies. One, back in the ancient times, you had real danger and real peril at your doorstep. And we know how much spirituality, belief in something bigger and better and greater and more expound that they could even formulate in their own with their own hands, right? They literally needed it, right? And I believe they needed it in order to maintain and enjoy life.
Mhm.
And now in our modern age, where dangers are not at your doorstep typically for most Americans, certainly, you have, I believe, an age of transformation that we are literally living through. And the transformation that I've experienced in my life, which I think is is where we're heading, is this. My I wasn't raised spiritual. I wasn't raised in any religious manner. And though I talked to God, when my little brother got lost once, I prayed to God, please bring my brother back. I think as humans, we all have that. When times get really scary, right? We reach out. And I think we all know right now religion is bullshit. I think we know that there's stories. I think we know that there's stories told. I think we also partially know some of them might be true stories. People
Mhm.
typically don't make up stories, right?
Right.
Typically people write about true events. Okay, maybe there is truth in there. And then I also think we're in this age of discovery. And I think I'm not the age of discovery that the cosmos and our universe and the stars and the galaxies are so vast.
Mhm.
And with all the Pentagon and UFO disclosures that have happened, I think we're years away potentially from a human realization that we're not as confined and finite in that confinement.
Right.
And if you just imagine and allow that to be true, just allow it to be true that like the confinement and the finiteness that our generation I have really like internalized, right? This is all there is. This is it. That notion is paralyzing.
Yep.
And what if it's just so not true? And what if it exists because it gives us like the move to transform something? And what if when you transform it in your own life, you unlock not just joys, let's
Mhm.
leave the positive foo stuff aside, because in my experience, actually, happiness is also tied to being right. And I'll get to that in a minute, but let's leave the positive feelings aside. I want to be happy. I want to live happy. Forget that. But what if it's just about challenges? What if We're here on earth to be challenged, to grow, to expand, to live a life that is meaningful. Define meaning. What the F is meaning? When I, so 5 years before I actually started Felt, I wrote down a list of things that I wanted. One of them was a meaningful company because I worked at a company then that built software for car dealerships and I just didn't find it very meaningful. And I knew I wanted to do something that's with meaning.
Right.
And what I've been doing ever since I started Felt was, I think, really understanding what meaningful meant to me. It's not easy, and it's not happy, and it's not comfortable. What it is expansive.
Hmm.
As a person, I remember one time as a quick early after my early 20s, a girl broke up with me, and I drank so much at the bars during a 2 month span to get over it that I probably almost died in drunk driving incidents as an early 20-year-old. I went from living a very narrow focused reality. Like, I think we all do. I think we all, if you're like me, you come through that sort of pinhole of like culture, and I gotta be cool, and I gotta find a, girlfriend, and I gotta look right and be right. And then I think we're here on earth to expand from this sort of narrow pinhole into a more full self, into a more full being.
Yeah.
And within there is meaning.
Hmm.
And to live a meaningful life, I think, is much more about expanding yourself. And expanding yourself is not comfortable. It's just not comfortable, but it also doesn't have to be, does it have to be terrifying and terrible? If that's your path, and it sure as hell was for me. And then I learned that, hey, I can cope with terrible and terrifying. I can
Right.
endure terrible and terrifying. I can freaking sit with it and let it exist in my body. And then you learn coping skills,
Yep.
which expands you more, right? I think you have a choice as a human, and it goes. I keep going by these pinnacle moments because I don't believe in yes or nos, but I do believe in positive and negative. I do believe that at some point things do become pretty black and white. When you
Right.
get to these pinnacle points in your life, they are yes or no moments. I quit smoking cigarettes. I smoked cigarettes for like 15 years.
Yeah.
I quit smoking cigarettes. Why? How? I started talking about the how. Somehow I had this idea. Smoking a cigarette is like typing computer code, right? It's like a one or a zero.
Yeah.
I'm either going to say yes or I'm going to say no. That's kind of it. Because I struggled quitting for a long time. Me and my dad would go on road trips. This is our quitting smoking road trip. And we did that once or twice, and I followed the lead. And then we failed every single time.
Yeah.
Why are we failing? Why can't we quit smoking? It came down to a one or a zero. It was either a yes or no. So then I said, I'm going to say no. I'm just going to say no. The urge is going to arise, but I guess I'm going to choose no. And it was my first experience with meditation, right? Meditation is becoming the observer of yourself. I would
Right.
observe all these temptations and cravings, and I was just like, wow, this is crazy. No. And it was just that. It wasn't a game. It wasn't enjoyable, but it was interesting.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I do think there are these pinnacle sort of moments that are yes or no's. And it comes back to, I guess, you can do a lot more than you think. And the ability to, I think, perceive that we're not as finite and as infinite. And I know this is probably a jump for some people listening, like, oh man, this guy's talking about not being finite creatures and believing in spirituality and that your death isn't the end of you. And I am. And I think do you have to believe that death is not the end of you in order to start a business? Obviously not. But here's what I'll tell you, that starting a business is an expansive journey. It'll push you, you'll struggle, and all of this. And I believe the difference between failing and succeeding is being able to endure, cope, expand, develop new skills, and persevere.
Yep. Yep.
And perseverance is it's a journey. Mine has led me into the this discovery that for me and people like me, the idea that we're not alone, but but two, that we're not finite, that when we die, the energy of us never goes away. And I've learned recently, energy is energy. Energy doesn't stop. You don't
It's not
see.
created nor destroyed, right? It converts
Yeah,
into, right?
exactly.
So that's the whole concept of energy. I do want to tie in a few things you said, but before I forget, like, I agree with you. I think when you look at creating something, whether it's business or art, whatever it may be, it's your creation, right? And I think in society we get stuck in, is this going to be approved? How is my audience going to view this? Are they going to see the same vision I see? And that's never going to be the case, right? And I think for me, I recently read Rick Rubin's book, I think it's called The Creative Act, yeah, A Way of Being. And that really changed my perspective on art and creation, or you can apply that same logic to your business because it is a form of creation. And the second you start trying to create something based on what your audience would want to see, it loses that authenticity. And I think that's where we lose the the authenticity in our art because we're so worried about how is it going to be received. And you touched on that earlier too, is, oh, am I going to get funding? So again, you're worried about, are some investors going to see the same vision I see? And again, putting it out there. And the second you put it out there, the whole concept of your creation has changed because now it's out there for everyone else to perceive and they can all have their own perspective on it, right?
Well, you
Some
know
may,
what, it comes back to self-worth,
yeah.
right? And I know this might sound like a jump, but here, I'll tie it together. What I'm going to say is, what does it mean to be authentic? Let's dive in. When I What it means to me is I create my innate journey, right?
Mhm.
I create from this innate place. And they're opposites. One is I can try to imagine what people want and then try to create something, and it feels very contorted and contrived, right? Because it is, right? It's literally contrived. And the other experience, I go inside and I'm being with my internal experience and I allow creation to flow through me, right?
Yep.
Yeah, it's not passive. It's more of a state of interconnectedness, right? And how do you do that? And I could not do that for the longest time. Let me tell you, I wasn't an artist and creativity was a on and off jump starting experience. And for me, I spent a lot of time trying to be what I thought the world needed me to be in order to give me praise and admiration and a sense of belonging and like safety.
Mhm.
So there's these are huge. For me, these are huge ideas. Like the ability to go from like seeking safety to living authentically. These are like, they're just massive. And so how
Yep.
do you, and it doesn't, and I feel like I can sense this. It is a transcension experience. It
Mhm.
is. If you're like me, my version of me 15 years ago, and you're listening to this and you're like, this is alien speak. It's because it is. It's because and I'll speak to myself 15 years ago, you are in a hellhole surrounded by imitations of yourself. You're trying to imitate right? You're trying to figure out all the time who and how to behave in order
Right.
to gain something you don't even want. Because what you're
Right.
saying you want is to be accepted, but really what you want is innate self-worth. You want freedom from needing to be accepted. That's actually what you want. Freedom. When I first sat down with my therapist, and I just specified what my goal was for therapy, freedom. I wanted fucking freedom.
Mhm.
That's it. And I was like, wow, that sounds really vague. But that's it. I wanted freedom. And what that means is freedom from all the contortion and all the manipulative self thinking that I was doing every day just to get through my social interactions. And so the transcension is going from that place to a place of innate, dr- inner driven authenticity. And you get there and there's no way about it. You have to deal with self worth.
Yep.
And dealing with self worth for me was like the lion over my shoulder. It was like the shadow that I could not really tangle with because it was elusive. And that I swear is where you're either going to struggle with it or you're just going to absolutely find something in your life that will force you to surrender to it.
Hmm. Hmm.
And when you surrender, true surrender, just let go of it all.
Yeah.
Yep. And just let go of it all. Let go of all the trying, all the effort. Just lay down. Lay down your arms, lay down your will, lay it all down and surrender. And here's what I've learned about this recently, which was really an interesting new perspective. What I feel when I surrendered, my first time I ever surrendered full on, and I'm not talking about like baptism, which is
Right.
another form of surrender, but for me, it was like on my knees crying on the sidewalk when I was going through some really, really challenging times that were out of my control. It wasn't my making, it was happening to me.
Hmm.
But I was done trying to control it. I was done fighting against it. I was done living that way. I was on my knees, just aching.
Yeah.
And surrender was transformative because what it was this feeling of relaxation
Hmm.
that 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 I got. And so ever since I was like, man, I surrender all the time. I love surrendering. And then I heard surrendering is actually you surrender to your true self, who you really are. You're surrendering all the things to it. And I was like, what things do I surrender? And it got really paramount because now I'll jump to the end. How I see it now is I've always wanted to be like my childlike self. I remember as a kid, no worries, freaking it was the best. And don't we all just want to be that again? Don't we? And I'm not talking about lack of responsibility because
Right.
I'm an adult. I'm not talking about that, but I'm talking about this energy, this innateness of everything's fine.
Yep. Yeah.
Everything's fine.
It's again, it's the sense of purity and some sort of innocence that comes with that childlike state, and where your imagination is wild, you're just exploring. And I think we get conditioned as we grow, but as we grow into adolescence and then become adults, we're constantly being conditioned by our environment, by society, by our caregivers, and that changes us. But I agree with you. I think that surrender piece is to go back to that childlike state. But you also said something that you were going through a tough time, things were happening to you. But I like to look at it a bit differently. And tend to remind myself and others who I work with is it's not that things are happening to you, it's things that are happening for you. And that in itself can be a form of surrender, recognizing that whatever this is, this difficulty or this challenge or this adversity, it's happening for me because what's going to come out on the other end is going to be a more resilient individual or someone who's grown through this experience that can now take these lessons and apply them in life. And I do want to tie that back to religion too. And I don't think religion is BS, and I'll explain why. Because I think because in society today, we are so arrogant with our intellectual capabilities that if we can't explain something, then not real or it's make believe or there's magic or whatever it is, sorcery. And that's what people criticize religious beliefs as in the past too. But there's something to be said about the stories, right? And I want to tie everything you said earlier around meaning and perseverance. And you look at some of these stories of the men that came through and that are part of the biblical corpses and a lot of the religious stories that are there. There's a sense of, again, meaning there. There's adversity, there's perseverance, and you can believe that story or not, but draw something out of it. And I think we all buy into some sort of story, right? It We just don't know that, or we tend to deny that to ourselves. But we're all buying into a story. Money, the concept of money is a story that we all buy into. That, hey, I have this piece of paper that can allow me to buy freedom or allow me to buy consumer goods, whatever it is. And we all agree that this piece of paper is worth something. We're all buying into that story, right? Or this car, this piece of all this metal to put together is has this monetary value and we can drive it or whatever it is, but we're all buying into a story and we choose that on a daily basis. And I think that's, to me, again, there is a deeper meaning from that perspective too. And it's around perseverance, like you said.
Yeah, and I want to expound on the idea of religion. And to me, religion is it. It is. It's a story, and they're beautiful stories. And I believe in the stories. I believe the stories are true,
Yeah.
and I believe I believe a lot of people that are struggling today, including myself and people like me, need more.
Ver-
We need more than we need religion. I'm trying to find the right words for this because for me, religion, here's what I'm trying to say. My intuition has always said religion's cool and it ain't it.
Yeah.
And what does that mean to me? But that's just been my truth. And I think a lot of people know that to be true. That religion is cool, it's great, it's good for us, but it's not it. It's not all there is. And in fact, there's a lot being withheld. And I'm not saying anybody's withholding it. I'm saying we know innately, deep down inside, there's a lot more that we are withholding from ourselves. And and so it's like any question you have, you know the answer to, you know? And so for me, religion's beautiful. I believe Jesus and Allah and Buddha, all these things, I believe they're real. I believe they happen. I believe they were written about and told over thousands of years. And I also believe there's so much more going on. I just believe that we are ready as a species for a transformation of knowing what's going on.
Right.
In knowing that life has an end, but it's just the end of physical life, and that spiritual energy, even the personality structures, right? Like the Tomer continues, right? And I don't know anything to be true scientifically, but what I do know to be true is that this all is in line with something deep down inside me that has been yearning and beckoning for attention, right? For time to be given to it, for energy to be given to it, for truth to be given to it. And this comes back to self-worth, because when we cast away something that's within us, what we're doing is we're compartmentalizing the being that we are. And we slowly break down and degrade our own feeling like we matter. Like we, and when I say matter, like we are worthy of life, right? That's the innate core essence of being stuck. Or what does being stuck literally mean? It means I am not worthy of living. What am I even, why am I physically here? Like, what am I doing this here?
Mhm.
I don't really need to be here. And that's when I'm just gonna lay here, right? I'm not
Yeah.
like what? The other side of that is I exist, therefore I'm worthy of existence.
Right.
If I wasn't worthy of existence, I wouldn't be in existence.
Mhm.
It's not that God made up, ever makes mistakes or this or that. It's just you're asking those questions because that's the challenge that you are choosing to embark on.
Yep.
You're feeling unworthy because that's actually a challenge that you chose to take upon yourself. Feeling unworthy is a huge challenge. Walk through life your whole life feeling worthy and feeling content with yourself. That's awesome. And
Yeah.
for those of us who don't, and for those of us who can't even label it, like I couldn't even relate to this conversation 15 years ago. So if you
Yeah.
are listening and you're like, this is just not entering my sphere of consciousness, take note of that.
Mhm.
Because really what you're saying is I'm going to compartmentalize this whole idea of feeling unworthy and put it over here in a box and never look at it. Because by
Yeah.
looking at it, I validate it. And if I validate it, then I'm unworthy,
Mm.
right? If I go and look at the fact that I feel all these things, that means they're true.
Yeah.
And people who feel like that are broken and bad. That was my story. I couldn't
Mhm.
even look at these feelings. The feeling of being worried came up for me today in meditation. Like I said, that's a shameful feeling for me. If you
Mm.
feel worried, if you worry about stuff, you're not good.
Yeah.
And to transcend, you want to start a business. This is a metaphor to starting businesses,
Right.
right? I sit here and I look at the revenue of my business and I worry about it. I just realized this today in meditation. I'm sitting here worrying about it, just like I was a little kid worried about my parents as a youngster. And these experiences that we play out, right, in our societies they parallel things inside of us.
Mhm.
And the transformations that happen come from within and come when you look inside, right? I was, to your point, like when I said things were happening to me, I said that because it feels like it goes hand in hand with surrender,
Yeah.
right? For me, it took somebody bending me over for my whole unlock to happen.
Yeah.
And I have no idea if that's required or not for people, but it did for me. I mean, I, I hesitate to say this because I have no idea, but I never got to where I wanted to be, which is freedom, without somebody completely railroading
Yeah. Yeah.
me. And that's what got me to that place. And it was remarkable. I was just like, wow, I am where I've always wanted to be as a human, as an individual. My surroundings are like so different than I ever thought they were going to be. This is a classic story, right? This is not, I've heard people tell this story, right?
Yeah.
And what I want is for people who are like where I was 15 years ago to hear something in what I'm saying and be like, wait, maybe there's a way to do something about this on my own without having to have something else happen. And that's, I guess, what I'm wanting and not wanting at the same time. Cause I don't want to be that same voice. I was like, oh, you can do this on your own. Cause I don't know if I believe that. I don't know if maybe you do need something to happen to shift and
Yep.
force you to deal with stuff and force you to look for things out of yourself, because that's what I was trying to do it all by myself and just couldn't.
Yeah.
And I think that's also what I'm trying to say about when I hear about the telescopes discovering galaxies, when I hear about all these, I think about discoveries in outer space as similar to like bad things happening to people on Earth and not being a transcending experience, right? Because they have to deal with this. I
Yeah.
feel like discoveries, yeah, in outer space are like, oh, they take your mind and you thought you were a finite experiential life, and then it's no, look at this differently.
Yep.
And sometimes things happen in life that just change our perspective.
Yep. Yeah, I agree. I think that perspective shift is necessary. And in that discovery of galaxies, as you said, it does change our perspective because we have a limited understanding of what our existence is. And then, boom, something comes and shatters that view. And all of a sudden, you're reconciling everything around you and you're questioning everything because you're like, oh, what does this mean for me? And I think to your point, we need to have those moments of humility when things do happen to us because like I've met younger people and they're coming for mentoring or whatever. And I could sit there and tell them all the ways to avoid challenging situations or failures based on my experience. And I've had hindsight too that, oh, I wish I had consulted older people for perspective when I was younger, but I would have never internalized that. It's like the same guys I'm talking to who are younger, they're not going to internalize it because they don't know any different. And sometimes you have to have that shattering experience that makes you question everything to reconcile it and have that sense of humility, recognize that, okay, I am like fragile but not because worst case, yes, again, we try to bubble wrap ourselves and feel comfortable, but it's there's something to be discovered in that when you do, like you said, as a child too, when you have your first wound, you're like, oh, this really sucks. And I was trying to avoid it, but I'm okay. I'm not gonna die. And
Well, go forth, get hurt, and be supported.
yeah,
And I
yeah,
think that's what you're trying to offer is live life, make mistakes, fail, go through the wounds, and be supported.
yep,
And I
yeah.
think that's what
Feel
we all
faster, right?
want.
You hear a lot of entrepreneurs say this, fail faster, because then you learn and you're able to apply those lessons. And I think that's what life is too, right? We tend to avoid failure, and I'm researching a bunch of stuff on resilience. And how do you build resilience? It's through failure in a way, right? The most resilient people are the ones that experienced a lot of adversity early in their life. So they knew how to cope with it. And I think again, if we're seeking comfort, we're not really building resilience. And how do you go forth and start your own business if you're sitting in fear? Because so many things can go wrong and the business idea may never pan out, but
Yeah.
you
And I
won't
would
know.
say if you're sitting in fear, learn how to sit right in fear. And I think so many people, again, oh, I'm just stuck in fear, and they judge that as bad. Stuck in fear that I'm not supposed to continue. But what if being stuck in fear is like step one? Learn how to be stuck in fear. Learn how to sit in fear. And this cut to the chase. What happens is it changes. Your
Yep.
fear changes. I was sitting here this morning in meditation. I'll go back to this meditation session I had this morning. I'll give people a quick template that I use that I recently learned. And I learned from a channel called Bashar. So if you're interested in where I'm coming from, you can go YouTube Bashar and dig into it. But here's a template they provided. I feel, and for me this morning was I feel it was like worried and afraid. I was feeling worried and afraid. And I was like, basically, I was like scared that something bad was going to happen. So I feel worried and afraid. I'm choosing to feel worried and afraid. And I just want to stop for a second because I actually come from my first spiritual experience was through the 12-step program. I'm not an alcoholic, but I did it through another version called Emotions Anonymous, which basically the root of it all is that you're not empower you have no power over your emotions, right? And what that means is your emotions happen. And if you think they don't, just take a minute and see next time you get upset, angry, or even happy. Did you choose? No, there's no choice. So you're powerless literally over over the arising of emotion. But so that's why I want to stop here because I feel sad and afraid. I'm choosing to feel sad and afraid because I believe that feeling sad and afraid serves me. And there's this interesting thing happening here. You're labeling how you feel, which sometimes for me takes a little bit. So if it takes a little bit for you, you're like me. Then you're saying I'm choosing it, which for me is a neutral stance. And it's a bit confusing for me still, but then it connects to a belief. And that's the power in this template. That's what I want to talk about because the power is in the belief. I feel sad and afraid. I'm choosing to feel sad and afraid because I believe that it's serving me in some way. And for me, what came up for me was this what happened, I just kept saying it, and I just kept saying it, and I just kept saying it. I was feeling scared, and I was feeling scared, and I was feeling scared, and all of a sudden, I became this pretty like, the depth of observation was pretty profound. Like, when I say that, I became this observer, notice, like, just watching this. I was feeling afraid something bad's gonna happen. I was feeling afraid something bad's gonna happen. I was feeling afraid something bad's gonna happen. I just kept seeing this, like, pattern of I just kept repeating it. But what I realized, like what happened was it became an object. It became like this little bit of light that just kept repeating itself over and over and over and over again. And what happened was I gained detachment from it. I was no longer literally afraid and scared something bad was going to happen. Afraid and scared something bad was going to happen was became separate from the I that I literally, really spiritually am. Right. And so what is meditation is becoming the observer. What are we literally saying? We're literally saying you're the observer. We don't know what that is, but we know it's an experience that you can have in meditation.
Yep.
And it's a spiritual explanation. Like you're the observer. You're not your thoughts. You're not your emotions. You're a spiritual soul thing observing. If you move your consciousness into that belief, you can
Yep.
have this experience. So I want to end on beliefs because that's what we've been beating around the bush around, right?
Yeah.
What do you believe? Go and look at it. And you can say, I believe in nothing. You do believe in nothing. What is nothing? What are you choosing to believe? And how is that the cornerstone of everything? And I'm not sitting here advocating for, oh, believe in the Bible or believe in the Quran or believe in anything that you have maybe stigmas
Right.
around even the question of what do you believe in? I believe that there's so much more to take the this basis of religion around spirituality and transcend it into something new that has to do with the cosmos and the universe and everything we're discovering outside in space exploration. I believe there is a massive connection between our age of transformation right now and the religions and the stuckness and the frustrations and the experiences we're all having, the unworthiness and all this stuff, and a frog leap, a jump in perspective. I think that's what we're all like ready for is I don't want the old, right? Even though the old is good, right? I'm not saying the old is bad, but I don't want it. I want something new and I want it to be transformational. I want it to take my perspective and just break it,
Yep.
right? Because I want to see through because I know there's something more going on.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree with you. And I think we touched on religion. And I just wanted to mention, I think obviously there is a lot of criticism towards religion because of how people represent it. And I think people represent it based on fear. And that's why there's so much negativity that comes with it, because people are projecting their own fear and representing it as religion. And that's why you see that criticism, because people then tend to behave in acts or ways that is not truly representative of what the scripture, like you touched on, is actually teaching us, right? So I did want to touch on that, but I think there's also, as humans, we want to control our environment. And when you said, when people say they don't believe in anything, when they're like, I'm going to just dispense with this whole notion of God, it's not real. It's us lying to ourselves. We're deceiving ourselves by saying, oh, just because I don't believe in this, I have more control. And I think that false sense of control does create a lot of anxiety for people. And you see why there's so much polarization today, why there's so much divisiveness, because we're projecting our own traumas onto the world, and we're lying to ourselves by saying, hey, I have this false sense of control now because I don't believe in anything. Right.
Yeah.
And then the last piece I'll add, like just tying it back to what you're doing with your business with felt. And I think what we need more of in today is a shared sense of community, right? And that's, I'll just leave it at that. But again, tying it back, why were congregational prayers so powerful? Because it was a sense of community, a sense of unity. You were behaving and acting in a similar fashion with a large group of people, which doesn't happen today in society.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate everything you're saying. And I want to tie this up real quick because I had this experience this last week with control. I used to be very controlling.
Mm.
I used to be, I don't believe in God. And you hit it on the head. Why did I even take that stand? It gave me a sense of control. I'm choosing, right, to go against, and I'm choosing to be like, I have control. And and I've been in a much better place of freedom. And freedom, I don't need to control. Like, I have nothing to control. Like, why do I even need to control? But then
And
I had
it's,
this moment.
yeah, it's the
I had this,
surrendering.
but then I had this experience of the week where I went back into this controlling place, and I haven't been there in a long time. And it was vibrant. I was like, whoa, that was old me. And so
Mm.
I'll share this with everybody because what I realized was I felt a feeling that I was not comfortable feeling. I also wasn't in a place where I could be more, be even in touch with the feeling that I was feeling.
Yeah.
And then I had this experience where I was controlling and I was like this old version of myself that was not pleasant for anybody. And when I left, I was like, what was that? I realized, wow, I felt hurt.
Mm.
I felt hurt and I was hurting. And I didn't even get to cry it out until yesterday on I'm a cyclist. I was on my bike and this thing happened. I was watching this freaking Netflix show that I like for some odd reason felt attracted to watch, which I follow my excitement. So I was like, okay, sure, that I'm excited to watch. I watched it. Three episodes in on my bike, there's a scene where this young man, the character, is with his mom. And his mom, you can tell, is going through some tough times, but she's putting on a happy face. And he's like, hey, what's wrong? And she's like, I'll tell you tomorrow. And he's like, no, what's wrong? And she's like, I'll tell you tomorrow. And he's yearning to get something from this female. And man, it cracked me open. I got off my bike, I was on my knees, I was crying because I got hurt in this early childhood thing hurt inside me. And so I would just offer that if people find themselves controlling, if you have that sense of awareness that you're a very controlling person, I think this is a few layers down, at least it is for me and people like me, down in the onion, where there's a feeling that you don't feel safe to feel. Not
Right.
even with yourself, not even to allow yourself to even know that you're having it because there's so many layers you built up to arm yourself from it. A- And only by going down, sinking in and sinking in, was I able to free myself from that bondage, right? Because you're trying to control things around you. You're literally putting things in bondage, right? Like a bonsai tree, you're knotting things up and twisting. That's all a reflection, right, of the bondage that you've put yourself in because
Yep.
you feel unfree. It all comes back to feelings. There's safe feelings and unsafe feelings.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's the idea of how I've come to appreciate spirituality too, and we talked about going back to that childlike state because as children, we just love openly, and what happens through experiences is we put all these layers on and cover our heart up to protect ourselves. And what you're saying is in that, again, that sense of control, how do you get freedom from it? How do you surrender? It's peeling all those layers back to unveil your heart and start again opening it up so you can actually have that childlike
Yeah.
again.
And it's real. I had this conscious thought as I was sitting there, like crying, that painful heartache cry. I was like, can I do this in front of other people? Because this happened in a public setting, and then I had to go and I was a coach. I had to coach. I was coaching very controlling, very strict, which is not my style. My style is like, we're here to have fun and enjoy this time and learn and blah, blah, blah. But I was very controlling and strict. And my kids at the end of practice, like, would you not like to like strict? I was like, yeah, it was really strict today. And as I'm sitting there in this heaving cry that I'm talking about,
Yeah.
could I do this in front of another person? And that's what we're talking about, right? That is quintessentially what we're talking about. Can we, and I'm not advocating to do that in front of other people. I'm not saying that's what I'm trying to do either, but I am saying that is what we're hiding from.
Yeah.
That's what we're protecting ourselves from because at some point we got hurt and we've
Yeah.
learned that this hurts us. And again, the belief that if we get hurt, we can be outcasted. If we're outcasted, we will die. Right.
Yeah.
That's what covers me up from my own
Yeah.
painful feelings. The sense of death. I'm not saying this is easy or that this is the snap of the fingers. I'm saying that it's real though.
Mm.
And I'm saying that if you look at how death permeates our beliefs and then flowers into controlling behaviors and flowers into addiction and flowers into all these things. So you have to get to the root cause. I had this moment with a family member and they were doing all these outlandish behaviors and, they were in a place of real desperation. When I talked to them, I said, look, I don't care what you're doing because I know that there's something underneath it all. That's what I
Yeah.
care about.
Right.
That's what I care about. And so I'll just, I think we're saying the same thing that spirituality is quintessential.
Yep.
And spirituality, the aching, the yearning, the seeking, and my sort of projection is that we're going to have a perspective shift. We need to have, as a society, just something that happens, whether it's aliens contacting us, and we now know definitively, boom, wow, we're like in touch with another civilization out there. Can you imagine the transformative nature that would have, both positive and negative, right? For some people, it would just be like, oh, finally, I just knew. And for some people, it might push them in the other direction of, I'm not ready. I'm not good enough. Oh, me, oh, no. And that's what I'm saying is that we're at an age where technology, where religion, where the past and the future seem to be getting condensed almost. It feels like it's like a pressure cooker type environment. And I think that we can all take notice, right? And call it out. And what worked for me was seeking. I literally got on YouTube. And for me, the first thing I wanted to look at was how big is the universe? And I just
Mhm.
started checking out stuff. And then I spent like months on that. And then I went down, I was like, how small is the universe? And
Mhm.
I went down and the particle collider and how small we know things are.
Right.
And the other thing that I'll leave people with is so how I would say the first thing that I did was 12-step program through Emotions Anonymous. And I also had a dialectical behavioral therapist, DBC,
Yeah.
dialecticalbehavioraltherapy.com. I really suggest taking a look at it. It's therapy by curriculum, I like to call it. And so that's the stuff that I did. And I think there are some sort of things you have to do before maybe seeking how big the universe is, how small the universe becomes something in your conscious. Because I think you have to build up. I have this notion that we need to go through this to a school for life, right? And that's what you're doing, right? You're a teacher of life, right? You're literally like, hey, I'm going to help you live. I'm not going to help you learn science. I'm not going to help you with your math. I'm going to help you with life. None of us went to school. None of us, even in school, had a subject called life, right? And we need it. Every one of us needs it. Some of us have parents that assume that role of teachers of life. Some of us didn't. If you're like me, you didn't.
Hmm.
And you have to go and admit that you need to go to a school of life. And it's a weird thing. I would never have admitted it to myself because again, I was like, that's not cool. And if it's not cool, I'm not doing it because I have to be cool. I have to be cool. But I think if you're 30, 40, 50, whatever, and you're ready, admit to yourself you got to go through a school of life. Go get down with a therapist who can teach you life skills, coping skills, spiritual skills, meditation skills. Go get down with life. And my experience has been when I started there, I progressed into a seeker, right?
Yep.
And it is so much better.
Hmm.
Good God, is it better? I have this moment this morning I just want to share with y'all. I love Bashar teaches that follow your excitement. And what does that mean? It doesn't mean, I'm excited about getting an ice cream. I'm going to get an ice cream. That's a desire, right? Excitement is an experience. And you can do this for yourself. I do this literally all day long. What do I feel more excited about? Having a cup of coffee or having a cup of water? And here's why I do it. I do it because I believe that excitement is transmitted down to me from my higher self, from my soul, from my connection to the great all be all, from the universal energy cloud, whatever you want to believe in. But I believe excitement is transmitted down to us as a beacon, as a sense of direction. Because if you're like me, I feel like I have no sense of direction. I don't. I don't feel, I know I don't. I have no sense of direction. Do I know what I need to be doing? Absolutely not. Literally, I have no idea what I should do. I literally don't. What should I know I have a to-do list and I have some priorities and I have some legal stuff I have to do, obviously. But beyond that, what do I need to do? What am I supposed to do? None of us know.
Right.
That's why I love excitement. And I had this moment this morning. I literally was sitting there staring at oatmeal or staring at granola. What do I do? What breakfast should I have?
Yeah.
What do I feel more excited about? And I just had this moment of immense joy and gratitude to this experience of having excitement towards something. And I did, and I was doing meditation again this morning. I was trying to like really comb through this new relationship with this experience of excitement. And I don't have any answers. I just want to leave that with the audience that we all have excitement. We all can feel excited about something. I urge you to consider believing that comes from a higher power that is offering guidance. And every day, moment to moment, should I go get a, last night I was sitting on my couch. I love gelato. We have this amazing gelato place down the road. Should I go get gelato or should I just hang out here?
Yeah.
And so it's not a desire based thing. It's truly guidance. What do you feel more excited about? And the last thing I'll just leave you with, if you're going to consider doing this, is don't have any expectations.
Right.
It's not if I live my life this way, I'll be happy. Oh, if I live my life this way, my business will succeed. It's not any of that. So you
Right.
drop all the expectations and you do it, frankly, because we all need it.
Mhm.
We all have no idea what we should be doing moment to
Yeah.
moment, day to
Yeah.
day. We all need a sense of guidance. And if you should dig more into it. And Bashar teaches a lot about excitement and how that's a form of guidance. And it is